Now, we've had an amazing question from one of our parents in our school community. Firstly, let me kick off by saying if you've never seen any of my videos before and you're wondering what our school community is, my name is Raymond Wood. I'm one of the highest football coaches on the planet under UEFA. I'm also a UEFA ambassador and also a UEFA player agent. We actually help players on a pathway and a journey on how to make it as a professional football player. No matter whether you're based in Hawaii, England, Australia, or the Bahamas, it doesn't matter. We work with players all the way around the world. Now, when you're a member of our community and anyone who wants to join our community, you can hit the link above and go to school.com/pro player pathway, and it's completely free to join us on our community for 7 days to come in and have a look. And if it's not for you, you can leave and it doesn't cost you anything. But if you stay in, we open up opportunities for boys and girls all around the world, not only how to develop you as a professional football player, but also how to actually show you the pathway and how to make it as a pro. Now, we got a question from Matthew Freeman in our community, and a big thank you, Matthew, for reaching out to us, and thank you for being patient for this one. We wanted to make sure we got the right information, and we wanted to make sure we help you make your decision. Now, Matthew's question is, he says, I understand you've got a lot of pathways going to England and Europe, but do you know of any pathways for young players into Australian clubs? For example, the Brisbane Roar, or any players into Australian clubs, for example, A-League clubs, not just local clubs like Brisbane City or Lions, but for youth under 11, I heard a lot of people are saying QAS in Brisbane. And what are the pathways to the QAS? And would QAS be a good pathway for soccer for a player? Now, Matthew, I'm going to be really, really honest, and for some people, this is going to be quite controversial, but I'm a big believer in you need past experiences and you need to have witnessed and seen things to make opinions on things. Now, I'm very fortunate working in the football world in Europe and in the UK with some of the best players. I've coached Leicester City women's team in their WSL and the Premier League. I've worked at the top level all around the world. And one of the things that I always listen to is parent feedback. Parents are going to be brutally honest if their experiences have been amazing or not. Now, when we're talking about pathways into places like QAS, playing at national level, obviously you need to be identified. One of the biggest problems is, though, within Australia, and I'm just going to break something down for you. We've got probably around about 10 or 11 A-League clubs and W League teams. Then below that, we've got what we call our national NPL, National Premier Leagues, all around the country. The pathway in Australia, for me, there isn't really a pathway. And I'm going to even say even stronger, there is no pathway. Because you cannot go on a website and you cannot see a clear map of where you need to go and how you get there. Also, one of the big problems that we've got at the moment, and it's a big problem in Australia, and I see it in the USA, we're allowing volunteers into our clubs, which is amazing. And volunteers are phenomenal. But for me, volunteers should be helping with things like fundraising, doing a sausage sizzle, cut the grass, put up the goalposts, mark up the pitches, and that for me should be what a volunteer does. But unfortunately, we've got clubs in Australia where volunteers are given the reins on developing our future superstars. And for me, that's where the system is broken. It's got to be a paid model. It needs to be a paid model. And the beauty of a paid model for players and opportunities, we can spend hours on this one, but I just want to make it clear, Matthew, that if we had a paid model, we wouldn't have volunteers at clubs heading up the under-16s NPL team. We would have paid professional coaches, people who do it for a living. But they still can't quite seem to work out how to do it here. So for me, the reason why I'm giving you this information, you'd ask me a question about things like QAS, and looking at different pathways, I'm going to be really brutally honest, and I've promised myself in 2025, I'm going to be really honest from now on, and I'm going to share my experiences on some of these different programs and teams. So let me roll back 2 years. I had a mum and dad reach out to me who's got an 11-year-old daughter, and her aspiration was to play professional football, WSL, and to maybe one day go and play for Australia or for England, because she's got a mum from England and her dad is from Australia. Now, the dad approached me and said, look, we'd love to maybe look at doing some work with you and some private sessions. And I said, look, that's great. I can do private sessions if that's what you want. But really, I'm more of a higher level. I'm what we call a football architect, and I'll design your daughter's journey. Now, I didn't hear back from this guy for many, many months. And it got to me a little bit, because I knew we had something special in regards to, I knew his daughter had great foundations, and I knew with a little bit of extra work I could get her to where she needed to go. Now, I spoke to him and I asked him and I said, why have you not got back to me, Ben? Is there a problem? And he told me, and he was brutally honest. He said, his daughter's been selected by the QAS, and he goes to the QAS a couple of times a week. And when he's at the QAS, he'd spoken to a coach. And this particular coach had said that basically I wasn't a real coach, not to listen to me, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And they need to listen to him. Now, with all due respect, this is a coach who worked at the QAS earning $10,000 a year at best, who doesn't do this as a full-time job, hasn't worked in the Premier League, is not one of the highest UEFA qualified coaches on the planet, is not a UEFA ambassador, has never produced any superstars in Europe, and has never worked on football's biggest project. But the problem he had was the parents get told that the pathway is community football, MPL, QAS, national team, and then you're up and running. But the problem is, that's not really the pathway, because there isn't a proper pathway, because there's not many kids coming through. Now, one of the counter arguments is, well, what about the Matildas? They've got a great team. Yeah, the Matildas do have a great team, but 80% of those players are developed in England in the WSL by the top level coaches, and they moved there at 13 and 14 because they knew the system wasn't working, and it doesn't work here. There's a reason why there's been a drop-off of male players since 2006 who've actually gone on and represented in the Premier League, because of the new curriculum they installed that doesn't work. Have they fixed it? No. The wheel was never broken 25 years ago in relation to the men's game and the boys' game. They didn't need to change that. They just needed to add in and support the women's game more and follow that, what they were doing then. But going back to this instance, I managed to convince this mum and dad to give me a chance for free. And this is my job. This is my profession. I'm a single dad with 2 daughters full time. I need to earn a living. But I had to give my time for free to this family to prove to them that the system they were following doesn't work. So I give them an example. At the QAS, they were part of training in games, and they were getting games filmed. And I said to the parent, this is amazing, like that they're filming the games. This is great. Match analysis. So I just want to check with you, is this match analysis that's getting done by the coach, and then they sit the group through and they go through weaknesses and strengths, tactical, technical areas of improvements, transitions? Oh, no. They film the game and they give the link to the mum and dad. And I said, so that's the only thing that happens? And they're like, yeah. So they give the video link to the mum and dad and then expect the mum and dad to share that with the daughter. So I said, well, what does your daughter do with the video link that they get? Well, sometimes she watches it. And I'm like, what an utter waste of money and time and effort. Having a camera, having a tripod, filming a game, and not at least sitting down with the players and going through the match analysis with them. And the reason this parent got told was that they don't do it and they don't sit them down is because they don't have time or the resources to do it. So the reason why I'm telling you this, Matthew, when you're asking me, is QAS a good option? This is off previous experiences in the past 18 months from parents who fed back to me. Based off those facts, I would say personally, no. However, I haven't seen QAS in the past 6 to 12 months, so it might have changed. Now, one of the things that we do within our program, and you're part of our program, is that we do individual match analysis. And what we discovered in the Premier League was that we actually will break down your match analysis into 5 sections, 5 weaknesses, and turn them into 5 superpowers. And that's what we do. So for me, what we've done is with our program, we need to recognize that a lot of the time we've got volunteers who are in high coaching positions. We've got volunteers at clubs who are making decisions on the future of football, and they've got no background and no legs in the game. And it's crushing football in this country. So while we're still on a volunteer basis, or we've got coaches at the QAS or AIS or the national team, whatever they are, if they're not full-time and they're not in a highly paid position and they've got no legs in the game and they haven't developed anyone, I wouldn't seriously consider putting all your eggs in one basket for that pathway, because there is no pathway. It doesn't work, okay? What we've discovered is to recognize and understand where we are. Now, if I had a son and he played rugby league and he had an opportunity to play rugby league for the Melbourne Storm or for St Helens in England, 100% I would be saying to my son, go and play for Melbourne Storm in Australia, because the NRL is the best league in rugby league. They've got the best financial support, they've got the best paid coaches, and it's the most professional league on the planet. Now, when it comes to football, a lot of people get angry at me and go, Ray, you open up pathways, but all you're doing is sending our kids over to Europe and the UK. Yeah, for a reason. I'm Australian, believe it or not, even though I've got a funny accent. And I want Australian men's team and the Australian women's team, the Matildas, to do really, really well. How they do well and compete at the top level is by the environment that you place them in. And I'm going to just give you a little example, and we'll talk about environment. So you're over here in Australia, and you're in a squad of players who are, with all due respect, all the way down here. So you're competing with a group of players and training with a group of players, and you're being coached by, majority of the time, volunteer coaches who don't understand the basic foundations of developing a player. So what we've decided to do is, let's do it this way. If we call this your environment, and let's say you're at QAS, it's still a good environment because there's going to be strong players there. You might touch lucky and get a good coach, but don't put all your eggs in this basket and rely solely on this. And also, please, as parents, don't listen to this coach at the QAS and take that as the given. I would do research, and I would speak to that QAS coach and go, okay, what quals have you got? The first flag and warning for me is, if he or she goes, I've got a coaching qual and I've got an A license, the first thing I would question is that with UEFA, or is it with another federation, or is it with AFC? If it's done in Australia, this is something that you need to think about. In Australia, you could do an A license roughly, give or take, anything from 12 to 24 months. To do an A license in Europe with UEFA, from when you apply to being accepted, to doing your prerequisite amount of hours, to following the course, to doing your video assessments, to then passing, you could be looking at anything from 3 to 6 years, and that's the difference, okay? Now, what you've got to remember is with a lot of these coach educators at UEFA, they are developing players who are world superstars because there's been that much money and an investment gone in. And whether you like it or not, this thing is very controversial. The big thing about money, okay? But this is why it's so important, because when money is involved, people are accountable. You've got KPIs to hit. You've got to develop players in a certain way. You've got to follow rules. Unfortunately, within Australia, we've either got a very volunteer base, which is huge, developing or trying to develop our future stars, and they realise it's hard and they can't do it. And then what happens is, then everyone just assumes, well, my daughter or son or whoever was at QAS and they didn't make it. So it just shows you how hard it is to make it as a player. But is it really that hard? Or is it because maybe whoever you're with doesn't have any legs in the game in developing superstars? Okay. And again, I don't know, maybe that's changed in the last 12 months with this system. But I like to challenge things and question things as a dad of 2 daughters. Any sports my daughters do, I will question and challenge that particular sport, that federation, what coaching in my head. And I would go, okay, is what this particular coach is telling me correct? And this is the big problem, Matthew. So what we've decided to do is QAS is an example. If that's your option you're going to go down, the first thing I would look at, think about environment. Think about your daughter being in an environment where we need the players around her to be slightly stronger than her. And this is what we discovered in the Premier League. Within your squad, you need 60% of your teammates to be better than you. So when you look at your daughter's squad or playing group, you need her, if there's 15 players, you want her ideally to be, and if you're being unbiased, you want it to be around about 7th all the way through to about 12th. That would be the ideal number. And what I mean by that is 7 to 12 in the squad. That's where you rate her in the squad, because what that means is there's 3 or 4 players who are not quite as strong, and it's going to allow her to get that success. But it means there's at least 6 in front of her that's going to be stronger. And this is the beauty about Australia. I think we've got to understand and recognise we're not quickly going to move away from a volunteer base. We should be able to, because I know the majority of NPL clubs have a revenue of at least $1.5 to $2 million a year now. And they still can't work out how to turn this into a business and a paid model where you've got full-time coaches. If there's any clubs, presidents, anyone from the federation, QAS, anywhere like that wants my advice and my consultation for free, I'll give you it. I will share and show you how to map it out and how to turn this into a paid model where you don't need volunteers and you can run it professionally. The problem we've got is, though, at the moment, yeah, we do have a paid model in Australia, but guess what? You've got volunteer coaches running football still. Why? Where is all that money going? And that's another episode I can do, and I don't want to get into because it frustrates me of how much money gets poured in by parents, and we know where the money goes. It goes up to the first teams and to fund the men's teams, and that's not where that money should be going. Those men's teams should be self-funded. Now, if you've got 60% of the players in your squad are above you, then that's a big, big win. And what you then need is roughly 40% of the playing group, Matthew, need to be not as strong as your daughter or on a similar level. And that was the magic recipe for development. So where I've got to with this is for you, when you ask things like, is the QAS a good option? Is national representation? Is this NPL club? I would throw it all out the window and forget about the system in general and have this one rule. Take your daughter along to a club, try and get her to train in with a squad of players and do it for a few weeks, and you have a little look and you will know, if you've got a little bit of football knowledge, you will know honestly how much your daughter's struggling in that environment and how much success she's getting. If you can't see that, then you need to reach out to someone like me or someone who is involved in football to give you that opinion. And it's really easy for anyone to look at. They will know how much success your daughter's getting within that training session. So forget about that and focus more on wherever you put your daughter or your son, whoever you are who's watching this video. Have a look to see if you can maneuver that environment where 60% of the time they're struggling and 40% are getting success. You can do it by giving yourself a player rating. If you ask a boy or girl, they'll be really honest with you when they're in a squad of players. They know where they are in the pecking order. They know if they think they're 4, 5 or 6. They know if they're 15. They also know if they're 1 or 2. Now, the big problem is as well, you've got to be careful. If your daughter or son is 1 to 3 in the squad or the pecking order, that's a major, major issue as well. And that's something that you've got to be careful, because your son and daughter become the teacher. And what I mean by that is everyone gets challenged by your son and daughter, but who's challenging your son and daughter in sessions? And that's where we go wrong in Australia. This is where the development is going wrong. But there's another reason why. Clubs in Australia don't know how to identify kids' strengths and weaknesses effectively. We do, and I do, because I worked on football's biggest project for many years and worked on a £1.6 billion project. We have something called objective testing. Now, objective testing identifies a player's strengths and weaknesses across 4 key areas: technical, tactical, social, and technical. Okay? Sorry, the last one's physical. So technical, tactical, social, and physical. We do a series of 6 tests, and we can identify what your son and daughter's strengths are, but also weaknesses. Once we know that, we can put them in the right group, so we know they're in the right environment and they're in the right split. Again, why don't clubs in Australia do this? Quite simply, it's education, because volunteers are running clubs in Australia 95% of the time. So again, if you're part of a club, or you're part of an academy, or you're part of a school, or you work for the federation, or you work at QAS, instead of getting defensive at this, going, this is just another English guy who thinks he knows everything about football. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know everything in football, and I don't claim to. But one thing I do know, I know 99% more than everyone else, because I've invested 27 years of my life to learn this. Now, again, if you're part of a club, an academy, a school, you're part of the federation, I'll come and consult for you for free. There's no catch. I'll come in and show you how to set this system up in your club. Guess who wins? The player wins. Why do I do this? Because I'm invested in the players. I'm not invested, with all due respect, in the QAS. I'm not invested in the FFA. I'm not invested in anything else than the players. I cannot make that any clearer, okay? So if you want help with this, reach out to me. You can go to our link above, school.com, Pro Player Pathway. It's free to register. You'll find me in the community. Drop me a message. Say, Ray, I work at a club in Melbourne. We'd love to have you down and help us. I will come down and not only show you coaches, your volunteer coaches, I'll show you technical directors, and it will help you and help your club and help your federation look more professional, get better results, and in turn, it should be all about one thing. The question we should always ask is this or anything we do in life in the interest of the players? And if the answer is no, then we don't do it. But is this in the interest of the players? 100% yes. So Matthew, I hope that answers your question. Utilise Australia for your daughter's benefit. Utilise the environment. Is QAS good, potentially? Yeah. If your daughter can go there and you can get that split, and you know within that QAS squad, but you might need to go to QAS. You might just need to go to your local club and play your daughter up 2 age groups. Oh, and that's a controversial one. Or because of the age relative effect, you've got to get a letter from the king to play up 2 age groups. Again, it's because we lack education in Australia now to develop superstars. If this is done properly through objective testing, and we know we've got an 8-year-old who's outperforming every single 8-year-old in that club. The problem is in Australia, we can't prove that to that technical director in that club, or to that TD in that state, or that national TD. Well, guess what? I can, because I can run them through objective testing, and I can show you technically, tactically, physically, and socially where the players are based on their age. And if that boy or girl is 8 years of age, and they are outperforming and they're in the 1 to 3 spot of that squad, they need to go up, okay? Now, I'm talking from experience. 2 players I worked with closely at Leicester City, Harvey Barnes and Luke Thomas. Harvey currently plays at Newcastle United. We identified Harvey Barnes as being too good for his age at that time. We needed to ensure he had a challenge 40% of the time, 60% of the time, sorry. and he got success 40%. How did we find it? We put him up 2 age groups and we got the happy medium. What did Harvey Barnes turn into? Premier League superstar. So guys, this is what we need to do, and this is the proof is in the pudding. So Matthew, I hope that answers your question. So don't get too caught up with the whole system and names and coaches. Try and get your daughter in a squad of players where 60% of the time she's struggling, 40% of the time she's getting success. And if that changes and flips, and after a year or two, Matthew, you find that your daughter's really getting too much success and she starts to drop into the 1 to 3, what you need to do, speak to the club, see if there's an opportunity to move it up. And if there's not, move it on. Okay? One of the final things to talk about, guys, is MPL versus community football. There's 1 or 2 good clubs out there in the MPL land, and they will really promote trying to get players pushed up who are too strong. But for me, you've got a lot more control and automaticity within communities. Also, I'm a big advocate at the moment for the CFFA. So there's a church football group that plays right round Australia. And a lot of people I've seen in the past laugh at these guys, but I'm telling you now, and I'm going to give you the story. There's only been 1 player from Queensland in the past 25, 30 years who's gone on and played Premier League football. And that player is called Aidan O'Neill, and he played for Burnley Football Club. Now, I knew the head coach at the time when Aidan was there, and I know his dad through my really good friend. And I know for a fact his dad didn't believe in the MPL system. And I'm not saying the MPL system's wrong. Remember, I'm saying maneuver the MPL system for your son and daughter's benefit. But if you can't maneuver it because you're banging your head against the wall, because your son or daughter can't be played up, and you know they're in the top 1 to 3 players, consider another alternative rather than the FFA route. Because Aidan O'Neill done it. He played church football. And guess what? He played Premier League football. And why was that? Because Aidan O'Neill played up 2 to 3 age groups when he was younger because he was allowed to within the church football system. So Matthew, I hope that helps you. I hope you have a great weekend, guys, and get ready for our next episode coming up in a few days.